Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Good Book Club bonus event. And as you can see on our slide here, it actually says, welcome members. Because we have an amazing person on with us tonight who has written a book that has a lot to do with mermaids that we're going to talk about. So this is our bonus event. It is Tuesday night. It's May 2nd, 7 p.m. And we're just all very excited to be here. Let's move to our next slide. Awesome. All right. So tonight we are going to meet with Lorelei Kay, and she has written a wonderful award-winning book. Can we take it back to the slide right before so we can start? There you go. Yeah. She's written an incredible book called From Mormon to Mermaid: One Woman's Voyage from Oppression to Freedom. And this book has received several awards, it seems like through the years even, and very recently, and Lorelei can tell us more about that, just recently another award. So people are just loving this. It was published several years ago, but people are just loving reading this. So we have the amazing Lorelei Kay here with us tonight, and I'm going to read her bio very briefly, and then we will just dive right in.
Sounds good.
All right. Lorelei Kay. A mermaid at heart, Lorelei Kay is the author of the multi-award-winning memoir From Mormon to Mermaid: One Woman's Voyage from Oppression to Freedom. Lorelei grew up in Salt Lake City in a faithful Latter-day Saint home. She attended Brigham Young University and was sealed to her husband for time and all eternity in the Los Angeles Temple. Lorelei's transformation began when her bishop called her to teach gospel doctrine, the scripture class for adults, which included the Bible, Book of Mormon, and Doctrine and Covenants, which is church history. Like anything else her bishop asked her to do, she put her whole heart and soul into it. As she continued to study and pray, she began to realize the depths of problems and complications in Mormon doctrine and history. And that is when all halibut broke loose. Welcome, Lorelei, and we can lose the slide and go to the grid now so that we can all talk. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining with us tonight, Lorelei. This is just going to be so fun. I have to say that the last line of your bio, all halibut broke loose, pretty much sets the tone for the whole book. It's all through the lens of mermaid-dom. Is that how we should call it? It's just wonderful. And I think our first question for Lorelei is, can you tell us a little bit about how you got your unusual name? Because it's absolutely beautiful and it has an important history and everything to do with your book. So why don't you tell us how you got your name?
Okay, well, when my father was serving in the army in World War II, he was stationed in Italy. And while there, he heard the story of the Lorelei, the mermaid that perches in the River Rhine in Germany. So I guess it's kind of famous more there than here, probably. And so once he came home, 9 months later, he named his firstborn Lorelei. So that's how that came about. And when I was a kid, I was embarrassed about that name because, oh my gosh, have you seen those mermaids, those half-naked women? Well, I was a very stalwart little Mormon girl, and it was just very embarrassing to be named after a mermaid. So I was quite embarrassed. But as I got older, I finally decided to embrace my mermaid heritage, especially when I wrote this book. So I tapped into it and used analogy of mermaid all the way through the book to kind of get it all to hang together.
That was probably
pre
Little Mermaid, Disney's Little Mermaid. Otherwise, you'd have been thrilled to be named after a mermaid. Probably.
That's true. Now mermaids are a really big deal, but it's a little, yeah.
So
what changed?
What made you become a writer?
Well, my father was always a writer. He sat me down and helped me with my first poem, and that's when I was hooked. He actually wrote a book on the Book of Mormon. He was quite in our family's eyes at least, quite a theologian, scholar of Mormon history, of doctrinal history, and was always writing and working on projects. And I always considered myself a writer, but I hadn't really done that much with it, although I did attend BYU on a scholarship in journalism and enjoyed those writing classes.
So how did that turn into this book?
Oh,
I
this
mean,
book, yes.
is this your first attempt at writing, or were you doing things prior to this, and then you decided I've got to do a book?
Well, I was at a resort once when I was single. Obviously, that temple marriage, time of all eternity, kind of washed away, shall we say. So while I was single, after I became single, I went to some resorts, and a lot of people that were very interested in the very unique doctrines in the Mormon church. They were quite, what is the word? Stupefied and enthralled. And so I kind of got a reputation as I attended more and more and got to meet more friends there. Tell us about this, tell us about that. And then one day, one of the guys said to me, you should write a book and call it From Mormonism to Mermaidism. And we all kind of laughed. But, you know, I guess it kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And I started writing it, but it was 10 years in the writing. I say 10 years in the writing, 50 years in the living. The funny thing was, I had a real trouble with the title, because when he said Mormonism to Mermaidism, well, that doesn't quite work, does it? So I called it, for quite a while, it was called A Wave Washes Up. And I belonged to the Writers Club here in the high desert. And in the critique group, one of the members said one day, you know, Lorelei, you should reconsider the name of your book, the title, because people won't know what A Wave Washes Up is about. And I thought, what will I call it? What will I call it? And here it was staring me in the face all the time, just what he had said, except shortening it from Mormonism to Mermaidism, from Mormon to Mermaid. And once I realized that was the name, and it was a very good change. So I'm very happy that's the name of the book, because then I used a theme of an analogy of mermaid all the way through the book to hold it together.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. It is wonderful how everything ties together and in just in a fluid, look here, I'm using the same kind of a pen in a very fluid
you kind of
way.
get hooked, don't you?
Yeah, I'm gonna get hooked. Oh my gosh, it's just gonna be pun after pun all night long. But no, it's beautiful the way you weave everything together with that theme, and it really does suit you so well and your life. So maybe I think some of us have read the book, some of us haven't read the book yet, but are going to. Maybe you could just sort of briefly tell a little bit about your growing up, and then I know you were going to stop on a certain passage and maybe read a little bit to us that was pivotal, kind of. So maybe just discuss up to that point, and then if you'd like to read that, and then we can start asking some other questions. But just tell everybody, you know, your dad, very active, writing books about the Book of Mormon, very Orthodox household, and then there's you, this incredibly enchanting, creative mermaid.
Well, in our house, everything hung on the doctrine of the Mormon church. I mean, it was the way, salvation and the afterlife. It was a purpose of being here. It was the main thing that our parents could give us. We grew up, although my dad had attended BYU and graduated and was very educated, he hadn't done real well in job wise, and we grew up with struggling for money. But it was the gospel, the truth was the one thing that he could give his family, that my parents could give us, and it was the most valuable thing. And so to be worthy and to hang on, and of course also to get a scholarship to go to BYU, because, you know, so we worked hard in school, and we held our family home evenings, and we studied the Book of Mormon, and we always had family prayer, being thankful to live in the shadow of the temple in Salt Lake City. And my parents were both active. They both taught gospel doctrine at a different time. Kind of followed in that tradition a bit. In fact, when my bishop first asked me to teach gospel doctrine, this of course is many years later, and I was a single woman at that time, so it was really a big deal. The first thought was, oh, I can't wait to tell my dad. And then I realized, oh, that's right, because he had just passed away like a year before. And I know that he would have gone on the journey with me. I don't know what he would have ended up doing with that information. But we were always encouraged to study and learn. And he took the Book of Mormon apart and he'd look at this passage and try to, make them all fit and work together and come up with interpretations, meanings, and to get the best insights out of it that he could. And that was what our family was about. That was the purpose of our lives.
Lorelei, you were how old at the time you became the gospel doctrine? Because you went to BYU. You were married in the temple, I believe, if I remember right. And then you had children, and you all the way up till what age were you when this all happened? When you gospel doctrine teacher?
I was in my 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd lived 40 something years all in the church. Up to the time.
And I was really determined to be the best gospel doctrine teacher anyone had ever had. And I spent about 10 hours a week preparing for my lessons. And that was when I was divorced and I was supporting 3 children. I had a daycare. A lot of things were going on, but boy, I took the time for that. And when the course of study was on New Testament, I took a class at the local college on New Testament. When it was on Old Testament, I took a course on Old Testament. I used different Bibles and studied the footnotes, because I found that the New International Version had really some interesting footnotes and good information. But basically, I stayed in the scriptures, and I stayed within the information from the church. I didn't get all, anti or anything. But all the problems are there already. You don't need to go outside. So, I stayed within.
That's awesome. Did you have a question, Bruce?
Yeah, Lorelei, when you were married and working and divorced, was that in Utah or were you down in California? Because I noticed you got married in the LA temple.
Originally, we were married in Salt Lake, and that was not in the temple. When my husband had my then boyfriend, he had a leave from the Air Force, and then he was going to go to Vietnam. And so we made it through his leave, being pure, so difficult. And then he got a week's leave at Christmas time. And we thought, oh my gosh, a whole week, and we have to be so good because, next to murder, sex is next to murder outside of the, and so we decided that we were going to get married that week, although it couldn't be in the temple. And that was devastating, and yet the pure, what can I say? So
very progressive.
And then when he got
for
home,
the era.
The only problem was when he got home, he says, gee, I don't want to be married anymore. So our problem started right away. And then 25 years later, I was single.
So where did you raise your kids?
In California.
Okay.
Yeah, in California. Because once he got home from Vietnam, he was transferred out here to George Air Force Base, which isn't there anymore. And then we.
Oh, yeah, my brother was stationed there.
Yeah.
Right after Vietnam.
Yep.
A lot in common. Well, the one thing about your book that I really appreciated, I mean, I felt it really did trace the journey of what it is to be a woman in the LDS church in a certain era. Because for those of you that haven't read it, each chapter kind of just covers something, a milestone or event in a life in the LDS church, and her wonderful mermaid take on it. And almost every chapter is like, okay, this happened and it was this, but then there's this other side to it where the church is impacting it in maybe not the most positive way, but you're still forging ahead, right? You're still going, okay, on to the next thing. And you just march forward. Yep.
If it's true, I mean, that's the most important thing is truth, right? I was raised to believe that truth. That's exactly what took me out of.
Yeah, that's so funny. And the other thing that if you haven't looked at the book, what I really appreciate is she has basically a glossary in the back for someone who would read this book without any knowledge of the LDS church to explain, what is baptism, what is sealing, what is temple marriage, what is, why don't you talk a little bit about why you decided to put that in there? I just think that's the greatest. It's a wonderful resource for anyone. It makes it a very universal book.
Well, the footnotes are there because as I was writing the book, I had a friend who was also I left the church because of the kind of the same reasons, and he was writing the book. He says, the problem is when you write this book, people are going to say, well, this is the way you understood it, or your family just wasn't correct in this, or this is just a story. He says, you really have to footnote everything. You have to back up everything you say and make sure the references are right. And one of the first editors I talked to, he says, well, you can't put footnotes in a memoir. He says, either the footnotes have to go or the mermaid theme has to go. And I thought, well, excuse me. So worked with a different editor after that. But what I decided to do, at first I put the footnotes at the bottom of the page because I wanted to make sure that everything that I said, that, you know, this is what the Mormon church teaches, this is what the doctrine is, this is what the prophet said, this is the scripture that backs this up, the Mormon scripture. And I put it at the bottom of the page, but it didn't look friendly. It looked more scholarly. And so, I decided to put it in the back in two Appendix A and Appendix B, all the references that go with the different chapters, and then they're footnoted, then they're referenced back to the chapters. That's one thing in this big, huge award that I just got from Winning Writers. They really commended in their review, because they say, as they say on Twitter, she's got the receipts. I back up every claim that I make about the doctrine. It isn't just that, you know, well, this person thought this, or we kind of got it wrong and we should have got straightened out by a bishop. So no,
it makes it very universal. Yeah, it makes it so that anybody could pick this up and understand. Like when you say patriarchal blessing, someone doesn't have to go, well, that must be something that they do there. No, there's a description, you know, many times right out of the handbook of exactly what it is. So I really appreciated that. So I think the theme of your book, I just see you kind of going from event to event, and you just have this very positive attitude, but you're also a very critical thinker. You're looking at these things going, this just doesn't seem, you know, you're sort of kicking against it in your own way. Yet, as we all know, as a woman in the church in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you couldn't really kick against it too hard. But so that's why I think you pulled out a passage, I mean, a little chapter to read. Maybe now's a good time to read that, because this totally is your personality. Yeah, because you're like, I know I should do this. But I've got, anyway. Let's let Lorelei read it, because this is your personality. I think exactly how you approach things.
and
just a critical thinker.
So covers the book too, because it's kind of poetic, and you disguise things in the mermaid
metaphors. Yes.
Yeah. It's really cool how you did the whole book.
Yeah. So you're talking about, Landon, the chapter that we're discussing, kicking up your tail, right?
Yep.
All my chapter
heading,
kicking up your tail.
Our mermaids, yeah.
This is 1972. Shallow, like a puddle of water, is the best way to describe the premarital experience Brian and I have in the joy of knowing nothing about sex. Although we had a high old time fumbling things out, we have lots to learn about all the splashing and sputtering in this new sensual sea called marriage. Sex is our bright spot in a host of marital problems. Brian's conversion to the church, Brian is the name I'm using for my ex-husband, conversion to the church hadn't stuck. Although at first we both accepted callings and attended meetings galore, now he says, whatever I do, it's just not enough. Do I expect too much from my former altar boy husband? Whatever the case, we really need to kick out those old inhibitions from out of our bedroom, which is just what my Italian husband has in mind when he suggests, you want to do what? I've never heard of such a thing. Could I? Should I? Would I? I hesitate. Mormon rules guard every aspect of our lives, and although I've heard some rumors, I have to be sure what activities must be locked outside our bedroom door. Can I keep my balance in the bedroom without slipping splat off the rock of Mormonism? Since bishops know all the ins and outs of the sexual rules, I make an appointment. Once I'm sitting across from Bishop Pritchard in his office, my hands clutch each other under his large desk. which stretches wide before us. Its gleaming surface dares me to defile its sanctity with talk of such intimacy. My question sticks in my throat. Dare I look him in the eyes? A smile flickers across his snow-white hair as he waits and waits. Finally, I just blurted out, Bishop, does God frown on oral sex? My face burns hot. What must he think of me? He hesitates and then leans forward against his desk as his lined face softens. First of all, he says, it's important to please your husband. Oh, you. My hands loosen their grip on each other and relax in my lap. But in the meantime, he continues, you should pray for him to overcome these desires. Mamma mia! 2 giant lobster claws click, click, click overhead, pitted one against the other, with me smack dab in the middle. One claw hangs over me, hissing, do what your man wants. After all, he's the important male. While the other claw chides me, but it's still sinful. And here's the kicker. While you're at it, it's up to you to get him to not want it. Chiseled under the lobster's underbelly is the real problem, accountability. My husband can be pardoned from enjoying the oral adventure. He's the guy, but the sin still sticks to me. Instead of enjoying the fireworks, I should pray for God to intervene and douse him with cold water. He enjoys, I pray. Either way, I'm still on my knees.
Yay.
But when can my waves of passion be whipped into frothy peaks? Between prayers? But if my husband still feels the urge, my prayers have been worthless. Is God even listening to me? Or are my prayers stuck below the popcorn ceiling in our bedroom because I breathe them out by the same bed in which we break the rules? Hardly the questions that open the floodgates for sheet smacking, butt slapping, headboard cracking orgasms.
Here you go. Anyway, this is the flavor of this entire book. It's just, so whimsically and wonderfully written about real experiences that people go through. And yet, no, seriously, but then with the whole overarching concept of there's this high demand, high control element in your life that's directing everything that you do, to the point that you have to go in and ask a third party, is it okay? What's okay in my own life,
in the
my
bedroom,
intimate life, in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
and at that time,
you
there
kept
were
going.
rules. Yeah,
there were rules. Yep.
Yeah, there were. Yeah.
There were absolute rules, and there were letters written that said, tell your congregants this if they come in and talk to you. So yeah, that's what I love. You really, it's really a history of the different things that have happened that a lot of people now would say, oh, that never happened. Like you say, Lorelei, and it did happen. And this explains it all in a very readable and wonderful way. So, okay, let's go back. Okay, so you're having all these experiences, and then you are called to be the gospel doctrine teacher, and you're absolutely studying your heart out. And then what happens?
Well, we kind of went over that part already.
Yeah.
That's a big leap from talking to that bishop to this other bishop. 20 years later, 30 years later, I don't know, a long time later. And I was really feeling very righteous to be called. What a privilege to be called to be gospel doctrine teacher, especially as a single woman. But I always tried to widen people's experiences and interpretations, and I got in trouble for that, but my bishop would back me up. And the Sunday school superintendent wasn't very happy. He, in fact, created a second gospel doctrine class so the people that didn't like mine could go into theirs. And I thought, that's good. Get those people out of here. But we had some really interesting lessons. You remember the time when the prophet was on Oh, I should have looked this up.
60 minutes?
Larry King.
Or Larry
There you
King.
go. Thank you, Larry King.
Yeah.
And he made those statements about, well, I really, can get man become God. Well, I really don't know that that's the case. We really don't talk about it. I don't know. I don't know, the prophet says. Well, that week, my gospel doctrine lesson was on following the prophet, and it said, get some current quotes from the prophet and bring to your class. And I really prayed about that because I thought, oh, this is really, but that's what the manual said to do. And so I did. I brought up the interview with Larry King, and someone said, in fact, it was on the school superintendent's wife. He jumps up and says, this isn't right. You shouldn't be talking about this. We were supposed to, be sticking to the scriptures. And I says, when I held up the manual, I says, this is what the manual says for this week. And I read it right out of it. But that's what we're supposed to be talking about. After I was released, one woman came up.
Soon after you said that?
No, actually, I talked for about 4.5 years. 4.5 years. I got away with a lot. I mean, looking back, I really got away, but I just pushed it as far as I could. A woman said to me afterwards, I always enjoyed your class so much because I always got new insights. I thought, well, that was the idea, because the problem with the manual is they give the manual and they say, this is a reading assignment from this chapter, and then the manual would pick out these 3 scriptures and say, and this is what it means. But I did this dastardly thing. I'd read the whole assignment. I read all the scriptures, that whole chapters that we're supposed to read. I didn't think that they thought we would do that. And I thought, well, that's not what the scripture's about. That isn't what it's about. And some of those things I did share in the class, and some of them I just couldn't. But I lasted a long time.
Yes, if anyone else has a question, let's just go ahead and open it up. I think we've directed it long enough. I think Bruce does. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I stepped away right after my mission. Wasn't it quite unusual for a woman and a single woman to teach gospel doctrine? No priesthood authority. I've talked to my brother, and he would call me and I said, where are you at? And he says, oh, I'm in the foyer. There's a Relief Society meeting, and they have to have a priesthood holder in the building. And I'm going like,
Yes.
oh, all these 50, 60, and 70-year-old women can't be in a building alone without a guy there supervising them. But he was off on the other side of the building talking on the phone. So it hit me
If they got into mischief, he wouldn't know.
Yeah, but it hit me that you being a gospel doctrine teacher was kind of unusual. At BYU, I had I believe it was the first Book of Mormon teacher that was a woman. She was a department person, and she told us, she was the first woman to teach religion, Book of Mormon at BYU, which is just down pablum, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was unusual. My bishop, I had a good bishop at that time. He thought a lot of me. I thought a lot of him. I'd go to him sometimes with questions. I says, well, what about this? What about this? The manual says I'm supposed to say this means this, but it obviously doesn't. And he just says, so what are you going to do? And I says, I'm not going to teach it. I won't say that the manual says it means something that it doesn't. So I wouldn't teach it. So I would go to him and talk to him about some of the issues. And so he really supported me for a very long time. 4.5 years is a long time.
Was it a particular incident that got you released from the teaching position, or was it just, time?
I think it was kind of a buildup. Some of the things that I would point out and some of the new insights that I would bring. One of the items that came up was, oh, don't you love it when something just flies right out of your mind?
Happens all the time.
I've been thinking about the last few minutes if I should share it or not, and then I go to share it and I can't think of what it was. Oh, I know. there's a scripture, and someone that remembers the scripture better, but there's a scripture that talks in the Bible about this book, and the church says this is the book about coming forth of the Book of Mormon. That's what the scripture is. It's a book that's going to come forth, and we're talking about the Book of Mormon. But when you read the whole thing, the people, they're devastated, and they've gone through all this war, and they need consolation and advice from their prophet. And I says, it would be like these days if we had huge earthquakes and terror, and we're all holding on to our babies, the ones that of us are alive, and go to hear what the prophet says and the advice. What can you tell us to do? Where is God and all this? And the prophet says, in 2,000 years, there'll be a book. That's not what in 2,000 years there'll be a book. And how does that help me? How does that help us? So what I said that in the class, but I said, and so obviously there are dual meanings. I had to give church the dual meaning, but that's not what the scripture is about. If you read the whole thing. And every week there was something like that, and I taught for a very long time. Though only one time someone did get up and rush out, and actually I was on very solid ground then. I just happened to mention about multiple gods. I mean, that's no big deal in Mormonism. Everyone's going to become a god. There's multiple gods. Joseph Smith and all the apostles and all there's uncle gods. Well, I didn't say uncle gods and cousin gods, but I did mention multiple gods. And one person got up and says, this is heresy, and bolted out and went right down to the bishop's office and says, you got to release that woman. She's a heretic. And see, that's just Mormon doctrine, multiple gods. The next week, the bishop came in the class. Well, he talked to me after. He says, he's a new convert. Obviously, the missionaries didn't do a very good job.
That's not in the discussions.
The milk before meat.
Multiple
He had
gods,
not heard the meat yet.
Yeah, you're in the wrong church if you don't believe in multiple gods. But that was the biggest. But the bishop came in the next week and said, you have a very dedicated gospel doctrine teacher, and she really studies, and what she was saying was correct. So he backed me up. But there were just a lot of things that some people were uncomfortable with, because I didn't really follow. Well, I followed the manual. In fact, I followed it as well as I could. The manual says at the end, bear your testimony that the church is true, and the gospel, and the prophet and the bishop. And I got to the point where I just couldn't do that. But I had to, do something. And so I bear my testimony at the end and says, brothers and sisters, I encourage you to read the scriptures and study and pray. And I bear my testimony that if you read the scriptures and study and pray, it will change your life, because it's changed mine.
Very subtle. I like that. So
Have you
how
met
long
any of the-
after?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so how long after you were released did you finally just completely step away? Was it pretty instantaneous from all your study, or?
Pretty well. By the time I was released, I was pretty well gone. In fact, a guy that I was dating one night said to me, he says, because we always talked about scriptures. He really liked to talk about scriptures. He helped me a lot with my gospel doctrine class. He says, you've got one foot on each two shores, and they're moving further apart. You're going to have to make a decision. I burst into tears because I wasn't ready to leave the church, but it wasn't long after that. And then I was released and got harder to go. And then I heard about this wonderful woman minister in Riverside, which was an hour away. And she was even a beautiful Black woman, which made it almost more tantalizing to me. That was really reaching outside of Mormonism. And I drove an hour each Sunday and attended their services and just really loved it.
So have you had coffee or a drink with any of the people that were ever in your Sunday school classes?
No, they don't really talk to me. The only one who does was the one counselor that really helped me when I was going through my divorce. And he had been the stake mission president. And while he was stake mission president, they baptized more people up here in the high desert than anyone ever had. Well, the only problem was, before he ever got married, he struggled with male attraction. And the bishop says, but if you marry a good Mormon woman, God will take the feelings away from you. So he joined the church, and God didn't take the feelings away, and he got married in the temple, and God didn't take the feelings away. And so he likes to say the mission president that baptized the most was a very good gay man. And so he now lives more true to who he really is. And we're still in contact. He's in the book.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Anybody chime in? Let's talk to Lorelei.
Well, I'm really interested now in reading this book, mainly because I feel like the way you describe it, Lorelei, it's like I can actually learn about Mormonism while I'm also learning about your journey. And that just fascinates me. That really does. I just, this is very compelling when you describe the book.
When I was outlining what I was trying to put in the book, I wanted to talk about as many of the doctrines as I could, but only as they had applied to my life, only when I had a personal story to tell. But living it for 50 years, everything, even polygamy, because my mother died, my father remarried. Well, you know, in heaven, he wouldn't even marry his second wife until he said, do you love Flora, my mom? And she said yes, because he had talked a lot about her. And then they'd get married, because he knew these two women would be together in the afterlife. They'd have to get along, right? I mean, polygamy, that did influence our lives. The one thing that I almost put in the book that I didn't about that was that then there'd be a eternal threesome in heaven, but I decided maybe that was pushing a little bit too far.
A lot of people think it. They don't say it, but they think it. So
yeah,
yikes.
yeah.
Well, that follows perfectly with what I was thinking when I read the book, is that you were so brave and so vulnerable to share such intimate things, and to put a fun twist to it, and to make it light. Sometimes it was just really, you're a breath of fresh air, and appreciated that kind of intimacy, and in all ways, you know, just your feelings. It just really made the book a lovely read.
Well, I tried to keep it's a story, but the purpose really was to share these things about Mormonism that people don't know. Now, by the time the book was published, a lot of the information was available that hadn't been when I was writing the book. But it doesn't matter, because what the book, it still explains, it's different to just read, this is the doctrine of the Mormon Church. But no, this is how it affects the lives. And I know, Rebecca, you say a certain era, but I don't know that has changed that much. I think this is the way women are treated in the Mormon Church. It's not just that era. This is Mormonism. This is the hierarchy of men making the rules and telling the women what to do, and having to ask permission.
Yeah, Lynette has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I really loved the parts that you put in about women, because of course it related to my life as well. And I think you're right. I'm not that many years out, and I really felt the hierarchy a lot, the patriarchy. But I wanted to ask you a question. I think when you left the church, your parents had already passed on, and you don't really mention your siblings. How did they act when they found that you were out? And a little bit you mentioned your daughters, but I'd like to hear a little bit more. How did they react when you left?
Well, my youngest sister, she's 12 years younger than I, but she had left by then, and she was very supportive when I was writing the book. And I have a brother that I talk about in the book, and that struggled with mental illness, which happens at the age when young men go on their missions. A lot of times, you know, schizophrenia, unfortunately, and that's what happened to him. But of course, the voices that spoke to him were God and lots of promises. And we didn't realize for years that this was a problem. We just thought that you're supposed to get revelation, personal revelation, right? Isn't that the whole purpose of Mormonism? So we didn't realize that it was a problem, but that's a whole nother story. And I'm actually trying to write an account of that. So he is still in the church and doesn't know, but he's lived in a group home for many years. Right now, he's hospitalized in Nevada with complications of COVID, and I don't think he's going to survive it. But it's the only thing he has in his life to hold on to. I would never try to tell him the things that I've learned, and his ward members have been good to him. And one man from the ward comes and brings him the sacrament, and what else does he have? He never married, doesn't have children, So my sister and I, we love him and support him and do all we can. I've been there several times. I'll be going up next week. But no, he doesn't. He knows we're not active. I mean, he kind of gets the idea. He came to my wedding. I paid for him to come on the bus stand, and he came to the wedding when we were married by a mermaid. that part isn't in the book, actually, is it? No, because the book ended before that, because I didn't. We're married by a mermaid. So when we were married by a mermaid, instead of in the Mormon church or the Mormon temple, I think he got a little bit of a clue. But we've never talked about it. I wouldn't try. I wouldn't try. It's all he has.
What about your children?
I have 3 wonderful daughters. The funny thing about this is that there are so many different reasons to leave the church, and they all have different reasons. And my good friends, 2 of my good friends, we were in the Relief Society presidency together. We've all left, all for different reasons. There's so many reasons to leave. But my daughters, to get back to your question, my oldest daughter, she left because when she was at Utah State, she studied religion and how it influences, impacts societies and people. And she's just completely turned off by all religions because of her studies at Utah State. My second daughter, and she's married and has 2 children, but doesn't want anything to do with the church or any religion. My second daughter, she has married and has 2 children. She's in Las Vegas, Henderson, and she just kind of moved away. She had some good friends when she was a teenager, and so that was helpful to her. But all the stuff that happened with the gays and what the church, that's really moved her away. And my youngest daughter, who I really thought, well, she probably left because she was still a kid at home. By the time I really left, the other 2 were off to college. And she said to me, I talked to her about once, I said, I'm sure you left because I left, right? Although I never talked to them about doctrinal things. I just never did. And she says, no, Mom, I didn't. She says, I never bought it. Even when I was littler, I always thought, well, when I grow up and go to college, I'm not going to go to church, but I'm not going to tell my mom.
Okay,
well, that's the thought.
Rebecca, are you her daughter?
I know. I was going to say that. That really resonates, doesn't it? Wow, that was me.
And I
to
thought
a T.
that's the thought process of a young child. A teenager doesn't think, when I go off to college, I won't go to church, but I won't tell my mom. A teenager wouldn't care what your mom thought. This was a thought process of a very young child before she was even baptized. This doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not doing this, but I'm just not going to tell my mommy. So she decided that at a very young age. And so, although I don't think any of them have had their names removed, which, so technically they're still on the rolls, but they're not Mormons. Yeah.
Tell us, Lorelei, a little bit about in the book you had several examples of where you tried to do things, but you weren't allowed to do them because of because there was no priesthood leadership.
Well, I was on the stake singles rep. Once I was single, of course, I was still stake singles rep. And we had family home evenings, of course, once a month. And so at Christmas time, I decided to have family home evening at my house, right? But I decided to really do it up right. You know, I'd have gifts for everyone and have Santa Claus come, and they could invite their kids. And so I went to a lot of work. I did a turkey. I had all the food, had all the gifts, had Santa Claus come. It was a very successful. More people attended that family home evening than, well, of course, you know, it's Christmas and Santa Claus coming. At the end of the family home evening, we all went caroling at the bishop's house with Santa Claus. We took gifts to their kids. It was really fun. And then months later, I got a phone call from one of the gals in the single program. And she says, oh, I just got a call from, it was a super high counselor over the singles, who didn't have the guts to call me, by the way. He called her and said, you call and tell her that she is never to do that again. What? You tell her she's never to do that again. I says, why? And she says, well, you were in charge of it. And I says, well, of course I was in charge of it. That's why I was so successful. That's why I had such a good time. And I spent so much time with the house and everything, you know, getting everything ready, the Christmas decorations and the food and the gifts. And it's a lot of work. And she says, you can't do it again because a priesthood holder has to be in charge. It can't be a woman. So in other words, I can do it all. I can clean the house. I can arrange down. I can buy all the gifts. I never turned a bill in for all the gifts. You know, it's the church. Bought all the gifts, have everyone come, provide the dinner, the whole thing. But before we start, oh, I need a man to say, oh, we want to welcome you here in someone else's, you know, in Lorelei's house. But I want to welcome you here. And at the end, after we've all had such a good time, the man has to say, okay, we're all glad that you could come. See you next time.
Wow.
I thought, oh, you don't have to worry about, I'm never doing it again.
Oh,
We're
Not a
done.
problem here, sir.
No, but that's the same story as my brother being in the church while Relief Society was having a meeting because
Exactly.
Yeah.
they had to have a man there because a bunch of 50, 60, 70-year-old women couldn't be alone in a building by themselves.
But there were men there, right? It was a single.
Oh, there were men there, but they weren't
But they
in
weren't
charge.
in
They weren't in charge. They just weren't
They weren't in
assigned.
charge.
Yeah.
I welcomed everyone. I
Right.
said, here's Santa, here's your gifts, have the food. I cleaned the house, I cooked the turkey, I did it all.
Well, it would,
No. A man has to say,
Acceptable.
welcome.
would seem pretty obvious Santa was presiding. If
I should have told him that.
And that's not the only time that happened to you. You were shutting down programs right and left just by being you. Right. The other story
Oh.
about the speaking, that one got me even
Yeah.
almost more
the,
than
Yeah,
one party.
women's
that was the same-
women's conference of all things.
Yeah, no, tell
That was a
us about
singles
that.
conference,
That's
Not a
oh
woman,
my
a singles
goodness.
conference. That was the
Right.
same high councilman. You know, and what I've learned, you know, there are this type of men in the church and the doctrine supports them. There are good men
Mm.
too. There are, but that's, you know, good people and bad people. But the doctrine unfortunately supports if a man wants to really be I won't say.
I think the
A
technical
dick.
the technical term is asshole.
That's what
There
I was
you
gonna
go.
say.
Let's
If he
come
really
all the
wants to be an
terms right
asshole,
here.
I'm trying to think
doctrine-
of the mermaid term for that.
Oh,
yeah,
shell
I
of a
don't know.
bitch, something like that. I don't know.
The doctrine will support him is the problem. But
Yeah.
I was asked to speak at a singles conference in Big Bear. They had this big singles conference every year in Big Bear. They rented it gone on for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. The church owned the property. It was a big deal. And a woman was in charge of it because couldn't find any men that would do it. So she was in charge every year, and she called me and she says, I'd like you to be a speaker. I hear what a good gospel doctrine teacher you are and how everyone likes your classes. Some of the people from the singles would come and attend my class just because they really liked it. And I says, great. And she says, oh, and by the way, get 2 priesthood leaders to come with you to speak. Okay, no problem. So first I asked the bishop, will you come and speak at our single conference? Of course, I had it all written out on a paper, the time and the date and the directions and everything. And so I'd be happy to. That'd be great. I'll have my counselor take over that Sunday and I'll come and speak. Great. So I thought, who will the second one be? Oh, I know. I'm going to ask the stake president. And so I asked the stake president. He says, oh, I'd be happy to, except my son's going on a mission and we'll be in Utah for his, what did they call it again?
A
Farewell
or something
Or
like
going
that.
into the MTC.
Yeah, MTC. Thank you. It's been too long. It's been too long. And so I can't. So I asked the next counselor, and I had the same thing all prepared. And he said to me, oh, I'd be happy to accept. And there was a reason that he couldn't family. So then I thought, well, the high councilman over the singles would really be the person, right? Not knowing that he was the term that we already mentioned. And so I made an appointment, because of course you have to make an appointment to talk to these people, right? You have to make an appointment through the secretary. Can I get a time slot that's convenient to meet? So I did. And he was just kind of cool about the whole thing. He says, I'll have to let you know. Okay, don't take too long. Conference coming up. One Sunday, a couple of weeks later, when my daughters were with their dad, and so I'm in the house, and the walls kind of eke loneliness when my girls are gone and when they're with the ex. But this was after church in the afternoon, and I get a call from him. And he says, oh, my Alexa's going on. She says, I need to tell you that I'm not going to be able to speak at the conference. He says, but I've taken so long because I've debated if I should tell you the reason why. And I thought, no, what's the reason? You're going on vacation? He says, no, the reason I'm not going to speak at the conference is because a woman issued the invitation.
Oh, for God's sake.
We love Karen. She just calls it how she sees it. Yeah,
Sorry.
Like,
that sound
you can't make this up, Karen. I'm telling you, you can't make it up.
You can't make it up. And this has to be handled by the priesthood. And then I said, I was just dumbfounded. And I said, are you telling me that you won't accept this because of my genitalia? And he said, well, no. Oh, well, actually, yes, because a woman can't do this. A priesthood has, and for as far as a woman leading this conference, she should be doing this. Either tell me her name, and I wish I would have had the guts to tell him to go to hell, but I gave him her name. And he says, don't you ask any other priesthood leaders either. Well, my bishop came and I spoke, and I actually had been taking classes about how to put the scriptures to music, because I like putting scriptures to music. And so we performed the scriptures to music, and I gave my wonderful talk, and the bishop spoke. But in the meantime, this man actually put an end to the Big Bear Conference. He killed it because a woman was in charge, and he was made aware of that because a woman asked him to speak. And he even told me that was the reason, because a woman issued the invitation, and that's not the order of the church. And technically, see, the doctrine will back him up. And after that, the other counselor that I had asked, I ran into him at a sounds like a new hymn. I love it. The other counselor that I had asked, that at the time had no problem with it, until, of course, he had been informed, how outrageous this was. He was giving me, this stern look, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I actually apologized to him. But
no, but that's emblematic of Mormonism, soup to nuts,
And remind us what year that was.
It's in the book. You have to read the book, and you'll know.
That's right.
It has it in the book. And
because I just want to say, if it's like 90s, 80s, I was trying to remember.
Oh no, it would be. Well, let's see. The book ends in 2008, 2003, so I'd probably be in the 90s.
That's what that's what I was going to say. This is in the 90s.
Yeah,
this is not the 50s. This is not the 40s. Yeah, this is in the 90s, this
and
attitude.
he's
So
still-
yeah, that really,
Yeah. And so the Big Bear Conference is no more.
the
I
Big
don't
Bear
know if it's
Conference
ever
is
been
no more.
reinstated, if they could get a man that would do it, but I don't. I'm
They
not-
need to find a man with the balls to do it.
That's it. That's it.
No,
That's
but
exactly right.
on ex-Mormon Reddit, there's been discussions of BYU graduates having kind of a reputation, having difficulty working for women.
For sure.
working
Oh,
with
yeah.
people. And much of my career and a big international company, I worked for a woman. And, she was the best manager and the brightest person I've ever met. And, you come out of BYU and you grow up in this environment and
Mhm.
you work for people who you've been taught and you've internalized that are less than you. Yeah, that's an issue.
And the doctrine is the men do lead and the men do issue callings. He was, if you wanted to get right down to it, the doctrine supported him doing that.
Yeah.
So
That's why I was able to shut the conference down.
Yeah.
Lorelei, you went from this where you were getting, basically pressured from not having your male leadership there or whatever, and then all of a sudden, in the book you leave and you go off and you're very you start exploring the world. You really went completely different, and you're very open and intimate in the book about your experiences and stuff. How hard was it for you to open up, and what was it, the hell with them, that made you open up, or were you always this open, or what made you decide this is me and I'm going to put it out there for the world?
Well, it was a lot of things. Of course, the first thing was to not wear the garments. That was huge. I have two friends. Oh, my two friends that were in the Relief Society present with me, that when they were both leaving, one of them actually figured that she would wear the tops because she had a problem with the bottoms. Garments are two pieces. And the other friend, she wore the bottoms. I said, between you both, you've got it covered, right? And I didn't. But I would wear shorts, and I like to wear shorts. I'd never worn shorts. And my daughter would say to me, Mom, you're a mother. Why are you wearing those shorts? They're too short. I says, look, I never wore them when I was 18. I never wore them when I was 28 or 38. I either wear them now or when I'm 80. You pick. So,
you've arrived when your kids are telling you you're wearing immodest clothes.
That's
oh
right.
yeah. Mom, why are you wearing shorts? Well, I think they look kind of nice. So it was just a step by step, and not wearing the garments and wearing shorts and becoming comfortable with making my own decisions for my own life. That's kind of a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Karen says. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just so important. I just want to know, why shorts? Why not fins?
Oh, that's good, Karen. I like you. I knew I liked you.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
I knew I liked you.
That's excellent. Do we have any other questions or anything else anybody else would like to ask Lorelei? This has just been so much
I
fun.
just want to say once again, this has been thoroughly entertaining, very enlightening, and I've got to make sure I can get this book. I do audiobooks, so I really, really want to read it.
Yeah, I'm considering if I should get it on audio, because I know I listen to a lot of audio books.
Oh, it's not on audio now?
It's not, no.
Not on audio now. So
Yeah,
we're hoping.
And it's not Braille, obviously, either. We knew.
Yeah.
we were
I'm
going,
not
"We
there
need to
yet."
find a way for Karen.
I know there's this gal in Italy that says, you got to get it translated to Italian. Well, I don't know if that's going to happen either.
Wow.
But yeah, it might be a good thing to get it on audio.
Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of play there. So, well, if no one else has any other questions, I think I'll ask a last question, and that is, what do you hope overall that anyone who reads your book would gain from this? What would you hope someone would come away with? I think we all, those of us that have read it, we have different reactions and perspectives to it. What do you hope?
Well, initially, I guess my hope was to share some of these things about Mormonism, the idiosyncrasies, the strange things that Mormons believe that I believed, and now I think that originally was, but it kind of morphed into more than that. It kind of morphed into becoming yourself, owning who you are, making your own decisions, being free to be who you are. And I think that impacts, that's not just for women, that's men, that's my gay friend, that's all kinds of people. We get so caught up in expectations and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to live, and being strong enough to be who we really are and claim ourselves. Embrace your mermaid heritage.
Yeah.
That's it. We all want to be honorary mermaids. I hope that we can, because
or
it's
merman.
or mermen or mer people. No, it just embraces freedom, doesn't it? To go where you want to go, be who you want to be, just be completely free. And that's why I embrace this book, and I embrace mermaidhood. That's the message of the whole thing. So, well, we want to thank you just so much for spending some time with us this evening. It was wonderful. Let's go to our slides really quickly as we end, and then we'll log off and maybe chat a little bit more off the record.
There you go.
There you go. That's right. The exciting things happen off the record. So we want to remind everybody that we do have the Good Book Club podcast in audio format. And this interview and this discussion will be available quite soon. You can find it on any podcast platform, and then you can revisit it or share it with your friends and tell them how amazing this book and how amazing our author today was. So check that out. I also want to remind everybody who's in the book club, our book this month is Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. This is just an amazing book. Everybody that's digging into this, it's incredible. Usually we meet on the second Sunday of each month at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, but because of Mother's Day, we've had to move it because we figured we'd have a lot of mothers mad at us or families mad at us if we stole their family member for book club. So we will be doing that on the 21st at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So come read with us. It's extremely fun. And Bruce is going to be leading the discussion. So very exciting. If you are with us today and you're not a part of the Good Book Club and you'd like to be, we have a ton of fun. You can find us on Facebook. That's our logo right there. You can find us on Instagram. You can send me an email personally at thegoodbookclub@mail.com, and I'll write you back and tell you how to connect. But we have a lot of fun with book club meetings and bonus meetings and just community. It's a really good time with a lot of really wonderful people. And I think our last slide, second to last slide here. So I've been advertising this with a lot of beautiful artwork, you may have noticed. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. It is a mermaid who's reading. I like to think of it as a librarian mermaid. But all of these illustrations that I've been advertising that we use in our slides were created by Karen right here, our book club member, Karen Banyard. Yes. And she is a beautiful, wonderful artist, and she draws mermaids and all kinds of other things. She has a website right there, morethanmermaids.com. I would encourage everybody to check this out. She is a beautiful, also award-winning artist. One of her drawings and illustrations was chosen as, it was the Braille Christmas card. Is that right, Karen?
Yeah.
Yep, for the Braille Institution. Yeah, chosen over many, many others. So just beautiful, whimsical, incredible. If you think back to the slides we shared at the beginning, there were some other mermaids, but Karen sent me this card. I have it framed in my office, and I just absolutely love it. So I would encourage everybody to check out this website. You can buy cards, you can buy drawings, and just enjoy this beautiful, beautiful artwork as Karen has discovered her own inner mermaid and is expressing that through her gift of art. So can't say enough about that. And this picture is when we went and visited Karen and Bruce. You can recognize some of us. We were down there at Christmas time on a book club field trip to see Book of Mormon the musical, and just had a wonderful time getting to know her better, and just lots of fun. So thank you, Karen, for the beautiful illustrations and letting us use them to advertise this evening. So just wonderful.
She even did a stained glass window with Lorelei.
Did a stained glass window. That's right. 2 of her mermaids are named Lorelei. So just wonderful. I'm glad you two
I
mermaids
designed
got
the
together.
window. I didn't make it.
Right, you designed it and it became
Design the
a window.
window. That's
Yeah.
right. So yeah,
Oh.
got to get the mermaids together. So awesome. And I think
Yeah.
our last slide is just want to
Well.
remind everybody one more time, if you're here in Utah, the book club is going on an overnight field trip to Fremont State Park, where we're going to spend 2 days with Dr. John Lundwell, learning all about cultural astronomy and looking at rock art. It's going to be amazing. So if you want to come, email me, text me, whatever, and a group of us are going down together. So, and I think that's it. And then I think we'll say thank you again to our author. Encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. You can find it on Amazon, and it really is just a beautiful, free, expressive, wonderful experience to read this. So thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. We will say goodbye from the Good Book Club for now. Thank you.